I have tried like 3 times to film this because I am so excited. All right, hello and welcome back. This week we are getting a little cozy, getting a little personal, philosophical, reflective with Shifting Forward by Carrie Jane Knowles. So, Shifting Forward is nonfiction, and the cool thing about this book is that it's a collection of essays and reflections. Its subtitle is 50 Reflections on Everyday Life, written by Knowles, originally for Psychology Today. So if any of y'all are fans, you've probably come across the column, I would imagine. And if you're not fans and this piques your curiosity, you can pop over to Psychology Today and check it out. I'll link it below. The other cool thing about this book is, one, I partner with Inkberry Books in Niwot, so this also is appearing in the local Niwot newspaper, the Left Hand Valley Courier, and two, it's an advanced reader copy. So this book is not out yet. It's going to be out May 15th, so if you have been piqued, you're gonna have to hang tight. But like I said, you can check out Psychology Today and kind of get your own little sneak peek. So, like I said, I'm really excited about this book. So I'm gonna jump to the do I recommend it or not part and say absolutely. I just love it. It's so much fun. I can't really think of a reason why you wouldn't like the book. I could see where it might not be your first choice, and I get that. Because I feel like with a lot of self-help kind of sounding reading, it can be a little intimidating. It could also be a little annoying because you're just kind of like, who are you as a writer to tell me how I should live my life? And Knowles isn't like that, and that's what I really like about this collection. Now, not all of the essays are life hacky or preachy or this is how to live a better life. Now, it is broken up into 5 sections and a postscript. And the first section is it's all about living with purpose. The second is first love yourself. The third is lessons from COVID. Fourth, good question. And part 5 is shifting forward to a cleaner, safer world. So within these 50 reflections, there are some that are a little life hacky. For example, in Shifting Forward to a Cleaner, Safer World, there's a couple of, I'm not going to say reflection here, I'm going to say essays, where Knowles talks about cleaning but greenly, and she talks all about how powerful baking soda and vinegar are, and it was a little bit of a surprise when I got to those chapters, just because I didn't really know what to expect. But it was kind of fun. But in terms of actual reflections and kind of venturing into the world of self-help, there are a number of reflections where Knowles takes an anecdote from her own life and she simultaneously takes an idea, a concept, and mixes the two together into a really engaging read, and then kind of just leaves it with the reader to figure out for themselves what you want to do next. Maybe you take her anecdote and run with it and see if you can apply the lesson that she learned to your own life. Maybe you just say, interesting point. Maybe you're like, psh, who are you to tell me what to do or think or say, Knowles? I didn't feel that way. Maybe you will. But just the way that she is as a writer, I think that's okay. Because it just, in a word, this book is approachable. This book is warm, it's thoughtful, it's funny at times. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. There were a couple of reflections actually where upon reading it I just had to share it with my family. There's one, for example, called Could You Travel with Less and Enjoy the Journey More? And it starts out with Knowles talking about taking a trip to Greece, and how she met this woman there who just carries a purse with her essential items and doesn't carry any luggage. And then Knowles takes an interesting route, I think, where she talks about how the airline industry, by way of their annoying baggage rates, kind of promotes this idea that you don't need all this material stuff, and if you think that you need it, we're gonna charge you. And she says, I don't think that this is really a bad thing, because when you have tangibly fewer items with you, you're able to be more engaged to a degree. You don't have to worry like, oh my gosh, did I lose my luggage? You don't have as many of those like logistical worries, which I think is kind of interesting because it does relate to it's that idea that like a cluttered physical life is indicative of a cluttered mind, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing. But it is interesting to think that if you declutter or if you do like spring cleaning, that you might benefit in more ways than just tangibly. And there's this other reflection. It's about a red purse. And as soon as I read about Knowles' red purse, I was like, wait a second. I've got a bright red purse. And I ran to talk to my mom and I was like, oh my gosh, Mom. And I told her all about I read it to her and she's like, oh my gosh, that's exactly like your red purse. And so you're probably sitting here thinking like, Hannah, what does a red purse have to do with anything? What does it have to do with daily life and lessons that you might learn from it? It has to do with being bold and living your truth and just having fun. You know, honestly, when I got this, I was a little bit nervous because it looks fancy. My sister told me, she's like, Hannah, you look like that Pilates mom who's trying to flex on everybody else while wearing her Lululemons and carrying her fancy purse. And that made me laugh. And so did Knowles' reflection, because it does kind of make you feel like it. It kind of gives you like this weird sense of confidence. And I just love how Knowles talks about she got this purse and her husband says, that's really pretty. You should save it for a special occasion. She's like, heck no. I love this thing. I'm carrying it with me every day. And that's exactly how I've ended up feeling about this purse. And so that's another thing that I just really, really enjoy about this book is it's so relatable. Even when it shifts to kind of more bummer topics like COVID, I know we're all so tired of COVID. I cannot begin to express how over it I am. For instance, Knowles talks about her first in-person author event and how she had this nightmare multiple times in one night about it. And that's anxiety that I'm experiencing now, especially with Omicron. So A, it's relatable, but B, it's so vulnerable. And I just really appreciate that because I feel like in a lot of fiction, you get to see a vulnerable side of authors because even though it's a fictional story about people who don't exist, it's a little bit of the writer's soul in there. Like that was something that was in their head and their heart for so long that they put on paper and they shared with you to say, hey, I really like this. I hope that you like it. Here's a gift. Whereas with nonfiction, there is still definitely a lot of that to writing nonfiction, but it's a little bit different because it's not necessarily your story. So it's not necessarily all of your heart that you're putting into it. It's certainly all of your effort and all your dedication and all of that, but it's not quite the same. Whereas with this, you still get that sense of vulnerability, that sense of sharing, that sense of intimacy with Knowles as a writer that is just so unique and so powerful. And I just really like this book, you guys. I think it's kind of funny. I wouldn't say that her reflections are like groundbreaking or like mind-blowing new revelations. However, she puts them in such a way that it's just delightful. It's unique, it's fresh. I love, for example, and I wrote about this in the blog version so you can see it below. She talks about being in a water aerobics class and she sees this lifeguard just like really focusing in on the class. And that's another thing that I think is really interesting about her writing and kind of reminds me of a journalism class that I took in college where my professor said, I'll include as many senses as you can, like colors, smells, sights, etc., because it makes it more evocative for the reader. And Knowles does this. And again, not that you can't do that with nonfiction, because you can. I just think she does it really, really well and in a fresh way that I don't see a lot. So I appreciate it. But anyway, so she's talking about being in this water aerobics class and she sees this lifeguard and she realizes he's truly guarding life. Like in this moment, it kind of reminded me of my yoga classes when they're like, we're gonna hold a space for you. Like, he was holding a space for the water aerobic practitioners, making sure that they were safe, and he was guarding this little moment in life, in all of their lives. And I think that's a really cool way to reframe living in the moment. Like, we always hear about that, but we don't hear about it in this way. And so I think the fact that Knowles framed it like that is just super interesting. And she does that throughout the book. She does that with, for instance, being bold. She does that with saying, hey, you know what? I'm not okay going out without double masking. And she does that with, you know what? I really, really love Harry Potter. It helped me to read, but like, maybe J.K. Rowling isn't my favorite human. She just has such an interesting insight into all of these things that we all as humans talk about more or less on the daily. And so to have it all in this nice, pretty book, I love it. I do. You should read it. I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't like it. And the other cool thing is, just like on a logistical note, since it is broken out into those 5 sections, if you don't feel like reading COVID, don't read about it. If you want to think more about ways to love yourself, you can pick those instead. And the other thing is that since they are so short, they're very bite-sized, so it's not intimidating. It's not one of those reads where you're like, oh my gosh, that was a lot of information and now I need to like take a minute and digest it. It's so good. You should read it. That's all I have for Shifting Forward. Again, it's going to be out May 15th. Next week, I'm taking part in a blog tour of Foolish Heroines, so I will see y'all then. And I'm trying out something new, so if you'd like, you can click the links to see some of my other reviews of Knowles' work. In the meantime, happy reading and thanks.